So this morning we'll be talking about the culture versus the law. We do know that tradition, customs, and culture are some of the reasons we see have these things in practice in 2022. But what is the law saying as regards the widowhood practices? What is the right of those individuals? We want to examine that because, again, knowledge is power. It's what you have armed that are with that will be, that will push you to fight. That said, I have somebody who's very capable. It's not his first or second time here. Okay, it's his third time. So 3 times is a charm, or how do they say it now? He is the founder of Gnosis Help Initiative. He's a legal practitioner, and his name is Barrister Olumide Omosebi. Good morning.
Good morning, Cheryl.
Thank you so much for being here again. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
How has it been since then? How many monsters have you taken down? How many people have you put behind the bar or put in cell?
It's a continuous, that is a future continuous tense. It just keeps growing and growing. We have a long way to go when the same tradition, culture overshadows the sense of reasoning. The worst is the religious part of it, and the rise in the rates of domestic violence, abuse, even child trafficking nowadays. So we are there by God's grace. Until the knowledge spreads everywhere, we'll keep doing our best.
Well done, because we don't know what we will do without some of you who are ready to just do those jobs irrespective of what you get in return. Now, that said, let's talk about widowhood. First off, have you had encounters with people who have been in terrible situations, whose husband just passed away and they were being treated unfairly?
Oh yes, absolutely. Some fact, as early as when I was still in the university, there was a young lady in my class, and she was already married. She was Igbo. And right there in school, she got news that her husband had passed away. So some of us then quickly told her to go to the house, take all the cars and all the title documents and everything quick, just pack the valuables out of the house. She quickly did that, and in less than 48 hours, family members had come in, where's my brother's car? She left the old cars there, cars that they had about 7 cars or so. She was married to a rich man. And then, they had come, some started removing the air conditioning, some started, taking, where are the documents? This is my brother's house, it was hell for her. But if not that, we had given her that right from school, quickly packed the documents, the valuables, the cars, the good cars, just for you and your children, So right from the university, we had already seen those practices where family would come and take over the property of their brother who is married to, at the detriment of his wife and children.
This morning, now I had already decided I was talking about this topic last week, but this morning while I was just going through my Twitter feed, I came across a very interesting thread which is talking about the same issue, and I'll read it out. So it's from her handle is Eketi Etsy, I believe. Please forgive me. So she goes, a lady who lives in my friend's compound lost her husband, and his people showed up from the village 2 days later to collect everything from her. As they began to harass her to bring the documents for the house, the car keys and checkbooks, a neighbor overheard them. He went and called 3 other men who were around in the compound and briefed them on what was happening. These men were dressed up. One of them, a policeman who was off duty, put on his uniform. Together they went to her door and knocked. One of her brother-in-laws opened the door and told them to go away, that they were having a family meeting. The 3 men ignored him and barged into the house. They said they were from the bank. That's the twist there. That the late man owed millions in debt, and they were there to pack his things. The wife was shocked. The man's people were shocked. Their spokesman said, "Officers, sir, let us hold a small meeting outside. We'll be right back." They went outside to have a family tete-a-tete. While they were outside, This woman's neighbor told her the plan and assured her that they wouldn't let anything bad happen to her. Now, 10 minutes later, her brothers-in-law, husband's uncle, and cousin had still not returned. One of the men went to check on them. Do you know this men had left? They fled and left their brother's widow alone to face alleged bankers that her late husband was supposedly owing. They hurried off to tell the whole community that everything the man had been displaying was on loan, that he was poor and owned nothing. This worked in the woman's favor because they didn't ask her to bring a dime for the funeral. Imagine. Now, after the man was buried, one of the neighbors who had showed up to protect her against thieving in-laws helped her collect her husband's benefit and sell the house. Now, after the sale, she quietly relocated to Canada with her children. Her in-laws nearly choked to death. I chuckle every time I remember how they showed up again to ascertain if the house had really been sold by the bank and that their brother didn't own it. Now, I find it really interesting. Just see the sharp change from wanting to collect everything to immediately leaving the woman to facing everything that was supposed to be collected from her because it was allegedly owing, the late husband was owing. So in the case that there is the man dies without a will and the properties the man has are actually in the name of the man, what happens to the woman?
First of all, there is no way you can talk about this without facing what we call tradition and culture. These are long-standing practices where people see it as right, especially when they say you are married under traditional law. You know, we have about two kinds of marriages in Nigeria. That is the court wedding, that is the marriage registry, and you have the traditional or Sharia marriages. So when you are married under traditional law, they tell you that tradition and culture would determine for example, devolution of properties, how things are managed in the house, the rights of the woman, the rights of the man will be determined under traditional law. So you find a lot of people not wanting to marry under the act. You find their families encouraging them to do just traditional marriage, so that if anything happens, their culture is that, the property of the husband belongs to the husband's family. Especially if the woman does not have a heir, that is a male child. If as I was saying, under tradition and culture, the courts the Constitution recognizes traditional marriage, Sharia, and the court's marriage. So once bride price is paid, the conditions for a traditional marriage has been satisfied.
Okay.
So under traditional law, there was a big problem where people would bring various doctrines, various cultures, various traditions, and it's always to the oppression of the women. For example, if a man died, then you would force the woman to she would shave her hair, she would go into a forest, she would drink from the water that he was bathed in, if she was, to say if she was responsible. Last year, we still had the community where the sister of the late husband came and, got people to beat the widow that she was a witch because a man that she had been taken care of in sickness later passed on. The lady left the city to go and sit down with her husband and you now beat her, strip her naked, video her and parade her on the streets. There are some barbaric customs, culture and traditions. But the thing about tradition is it's just The Latin word for tradition is tradere, which means to transmit, which means to hand over, to pass on. So tradition is simply what is passed on from one generation to another. Now, tradition cannot be verified. It was the opinion of the earliest settlers in a particular area. So there is no divine tradition. It was just the opinion of a group of people, which has now passed from generation. Somebody said, and you notice that tradition is always in third person. It is never in first person. Second, it's always in third person, because somebody told someone who told someone. You can only verify because you cannot verify because that person too was told by somebody else. So traditions are just opinions of men who lived the earliest period, who were the earliest settlers. They determined the tradition and the culture of a particular area. Culture is just tradition in motion. Culture is the way they now dress, the language they speak, their cuisine, what they eat. Culture is just the expression of tradition. But now the problem is when tradition now infringes on your right to choose. Traditions were made to solve problems that existed in that time, 400-500 years ago, which a child here already knows today. For example, the killing of twins. How did it start? It was a shock to a native doctor upon delivering two people. He had never seen that before, and he ran out and said, this must be an abomination of the gods. And then the town meeting was called, and it just became, a means of confusion. And when they could not explain, what they do is they demonize it. It is an abomination. Kill twins. What happened? A traditional doctor could not explain how two children will come out from the same belly. So it must be an abomination. So they just started killing. And people just did not know how it started. They just carried it on from generation to generation, not knowing that it was just the ignorance of one man. So it is just passed on. They don't know why. They don't know. They just we in this area, we don't marry people from that area, not knowing that way back it was a land dispute between two families that now set them apart, that we would not marry from this side because their earliest grandfathers fought over a plot of land. So they just say, we don't marry from they are wicked, they are this, we don't marry from that side, not knowing that what started this was land dispute between two people. So traditions are just opinions and beliefs of people that have gone over a period of time. Now the problem is when it now starts interfering with your right to choose a husband or right to choose a wife, what would accrue to your children. That is where the law has now set in. There is what we call the repugnancy test. That is when the tradition or culture is seen to be repugnant to natural justice, public policy, and good conscience. You take all the properties of a man, knowing that he has children. How are they supposed to feed? How is the wife supposed to feed? So the problem is that the courts, especially in a notorious case that the Chief Justice of Oyo State had to declare that once a man is married to a woman, their home is matrimonial property. At the demise of one, it automatically passes on to the spouse, the surviving spouse, so that people will not just come, kick out the wife, take the look at this gentleman, 360 towers that collapsed in Ikoyi. What's his name again?
I think Femi also.
Yeah.
Oshibodu.
Is it Femi Ocho? I can't remember. The high-rise buildings that collapsed in Ikoyi.
Yeah, I think Oshibodu, I believe. I'll check that out.
Mm-hmm. When he died, it wasn't up to a week. His brothers came and started taking his property, the cars, the Rolls Royces, and his children were still there. They had not even started mourning. They had not even recovered his body. The brothers already came and they were scrambling for his properties. So it's just a shame. But the remedy to this is if the woman would apply to court, just get a lawyer, the court will put a total full stop to it, because it is repugnant to natural justice.
Yeah, Femi Oshibono. I believe, yeah.
Okay. So, it happens. You just come in. This is some would even say, the other one tried to rape a lady 3 years ago because it was his late husband's wife and claimed rights that she is our family property. So, at the demise of the husband, the younger brother is now pulling the wife that and it's practiced in some traditions where the wife is seen as property.
Okay, let's backtrack a bit. Now we know that these things are just clearly tradition, and the worst part is it has fully defined some people. It has defined their way of life. It has defined, because that's culture. After all, culture determines your identity, determines your mentality, your thinking. Because I remember there was a case in 2020 where it was ruled by the Supreme Court that a man, I think it was in Enugu State, if I'm correct, that the daughters could have the access to the father's inheritance.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you remember about that case.
Yes.
And some of the village chiefs kicked against it, that this is a violation of our culture, while some were supportive of it, because nowhere should it be accepted that because a woman is a woman, or
she cannot inherit property. Yes, it was the women won in court, where even in especially the eastern part of the country, where they believe that men are the only ones entitled to hold property, especially in inheritance. So you see a small boy holding property where the older sisters would have to come and ask him for rent, that please support, because the father may own probably a larger estate. They will not see one small child who may be the last one, would just be holding. And it became a problem because it is supposed to be shared per children. The courts have also shown that the laws are not gender specific. There are no laws especially for men, then laws especially for women, especially, well, maybe some in under the Violence Against Persons Prohibitions Act, but all men are equal.